Welcome back. The mid-cap index has come off the intraday highs and there are a couple of stocks where we have seen some pressure. Let's pull out the intraday chart of Unitech. Now, we don't talk about this stock too much for good reason, of course. Going out of F&O now at the end of this series, and also this month it's gained for last 2 days. It's actually correcting quite a bit. Godrej Consumer is the other stock where we have seen some bit of correction. But on the way up, really the stock to focus on is Jindal Steel and Power. That is now up 6.5% out of trading F&O ban, and that stock is surging now. Mayuresh Joshi is also with us from Angel Broking. Mayuresh, good morning. First, your thoughts on Canara Bank and the kind of rally that we have seen. Is it a sign of things to come for PSU banks, or would you say it's good time to book profit?
Morning, Anuj. I think if you look at the numbers more closely, yes, I think the asset quality was much more stable this time around in terms of the absolute numbers of GNPs and NPs coming out. But largely, I think the kind of provisioning that they have done, in the expectations of provisioning still remaining high in Q2, I think that would be some event to watch out for and a number keenly to be analyzed. Secondly, I think if you look at the kind of degrowth that they've seen in their advances and deposits and the kind of moderation that we've seen both in NII and the pre-provisioning profit figures, I think it is not a very encouraging trend with the kind of run-up that we've probably seen in the stock. So largely our own take is that though the recovery might take place as the management is indicated in the second half, one should really look at numbers and how credit growth will take place, because that is going to be the key for balance sheet expansion and for the return ratios to improve. So largely I think we are maintaining a neutral view on Canara Bank at this point.
Okay. Mayuresh, hi. Good to see you in today. Have you managed to look at a couple of these smaller companies that came out with numbers, or these mid-cap companies? So, for example, something like a KG Denim, which is up around 13% on the back of what was a good operating performance. GHCL, which reported good numbers, but nonetheless, that stock is off because they're expecting flat volumes for FY17. Any of these kind of picks that you might have looked at and which look interesting?
Morning, Ekta. No, largely I think this is not in our coverage, so I think difficult to comment on these ones. But yes, I think a few companies did report a decent set of numbers operationally. So I think it's a larger universe that we're probably talking about. So SKS Micro, which is Bharat Inclusion, reported a decent set of numbers. Biocon reported a decent set of numbers. Yesterday, I think a couple of companies did report a good set of numbers. Navin Fluorine, for example, transformers and rectifiers. But largely, again, I think this performance has to get repeated in terms of both the operating dynamics improving quarter on quarter and the order book improving dynamically for each of these companies in their sectors. If those leverage benefits starts coming through, I think the cash flow improvement can be significant. Again, I think if you see, I think the prices have moved up significantly. So I think the valuation comfort probably in terms of fresh investments probably is not there. But again, I think specifically if you look at a few stocks within the spaces itself, I think they do offer reasonable growth opportunities over the next 2 years. So one really has to pick and choose at this point of time, because even valuations probably a little bit on the higher side compared to their 5 and 10 year long-term averages.
Okay, your thoughts on Cairn now, Cairn and Vedanta as well, post the revised terms of merger?
No, I think with the revised deal coming through, yes, I think the sweetened proposition for Cairn shareholders has been laid out on the table. The stock accordingly has responded. What really happens with Vedanta would be very interesting to note, and though I think we're still waiting for due regulatory procedures to probably take place in terms of key approvals, what the minority shareholders have to say. I think the other aspect that one really needs to also understand if the merger does go through is the tax liability of around 10,000 odd crores, which can have a telling effect if it goes adversely. And secondly, I think how the pricing is going to pan out generally for Vedanta going forward. So what you've seen probably in terms of prices for Cairn, in terms of the premium valuations with the sweetened deal is there on the table. But what will happen to Vedanta if the merger does go through eventually will depend on a whole host of these factors, including the LME pricing, both on aluminium, zinc, lead, copper, and what probably happens to their operational improvement going ahead. So yes, I think the cash on balance sheets will definitely improve the overall net debt to EBITDA position for Vedanta if it goes through. But again, I think all these aspects need to be carefully seen, specifically in the case of Vedanta.
Mayuresh, well, a lot seems to be happening in the online space. We just heard of another deal where Myntra has acquired Jabong. Your sense in terms of any online company that we could play this entire online business with through a listed company? Any thoughts on that?
Now again, I think dynamically, I think a whole host of changes are taking place in the space itself. And do not want to Really comment on one particular company, but again, if you look at their peak valuations, say a year or a couple of years back, and look at the kind of valuations they're probably deriving at this point of time, you've probably seen a huge amount of erosion happening in terms of their expected market valuation. So in that sense itself, I think with competition brewing up,
we have Bajaj Finance's numbers flashing, will flash on your screen in a bit. They have been sent to the exchanges. So yeah, that's the Bajaj Finance number. Net profit of 424 crore. Keep in mind, it's been one stock which has been in unadulterated bull market for last 3 or 4 years. If you see the chart of Bajaj Finance for last 3 or 4 years, from 1,000 to 9,000 without any meaningful correction is what we have in Bajaj Finance. Ekta, and we have the net profit number flashing on the screen now.
Yes, well, you know, Bajaj Finance is actually just the pure lending business of the company. So 424 crores is actually, they've always reported amazing gross NPLs.
You know, before that, I think another important trigger for Bajaj Finance, they have approved a bonus and a stock split. So, so the stock split is from 10 rupees face value to 2 rupee face value, and there's 1:1 bonus share. Yes, 1:1 bonus share as well. So technically what will happen is that this 9,045 will become 900 once it goes both X bonus and X split. We should have that flash running on the screen actually very soon, because yes, the numbers look good, the number is higher than expectation, but the liquidity move is something which the market likes.
Well, you know,
stock split and bonus issue.
Yeah, if that's the right profit figure, it's an 83% increase that it's come in for the profit figure this time. I think we need to wait by and see whether there's any sort of restatement in the numbers or not. But it is always a good set of numbers that they report. This is versus our poll of around 382.6 crores that they have reported. That was expected for Bajaj Finance in terms of the numbers, but this seems to be a solid set of numbers. Even if you just go by, you know, the 424 crore absolute figure in terms of profit, it would still be a very good performance which is coming in. Last quarter there was a little bit of a slowdown, but otherwise they've always managed to report very good.
Problem is that the stock has rallied a lot. In fact, pull out the chart, Bajaj Finance. In fact, if you were to combine the market cap of Bajaj Finance and Bajaj Finserv, the ones managed by the younger Bajaj, they're actually higher than Bajaj Auto. It's been that kind of a phenomenal run that you've seen in both Bajaj Finance and Bajaj Finserv. We're talking about what, probably market cap of 45,000 crore now for Bajaj Finance. So could easily be index stock going forward once you have this bonus and stock split adjustment as well. So 5:1 for split and 1:1 for bonus. So that's a 10:1 split that will take place. So the stock will move to 900, assuming of course current market price of 9,000.
Okay, we've got the performance highlights, and that's what we really need to go by. Customers acquired up 48% this quarter. The profit after tax is up 54% on a year-on-year basis to 424 versus 276 crores year-on-year. Total income is up 39%. Gross NPA stood at around 1.47% for this quarter, and that and net NPA stood at 0.41% in terms of the performance this time. Loan losses and provisions have risen 75% this quarter to around 180 odd crores versus 103 crores year on year. The company has said that they continue to strengthen its provisioning policy. We've seen that take place in previous quarters in terms of a spike up for provisioning, so it shouldn't come as a complete surprise. During the quarter, the company's made an additional provisioning of 19 crores in its mortgage portfolio. Loan losses and provisions have grown a total 56 odd percent. So overall, AUM up 40%, customers acquired up 48%, profit after tax up 54%, gross NPAs at around 1.47%, and they have changed it to a 120-day overdue NPA recognition policy as opposed to 150 days. So gross NPAs and net NPAs on a 150-day stood at 1.25 and 0.30. You are expected to move there, so it is normal for that to come down in terms of NPA recognition. Looks like a stable set of numbers.
Yeah, looks like that. Let's do one thing. Let's get Mayuresh thoughts as well on Bajaj Finance. Mayuresh, what a stock it has been, phenomenal, but at 9,000, is it still a good buy?
Now again, Anuj, I think phenomenal story, but again we are coming to the same argument of valuations, and valuations probably looking a little bit stretched at this point of time. No doubt about the story and the kind of numbers they posted this time around. I think exceptional set of numbers, and again I think the transition that Ekta was just mentioning from 150 to 120, that might have some amount of effect for this quarter and the next quarter to come, to say the least, and that can also be abetted by a little bit of an increase in the provisioning expenses for the company. But largely I think the company has given stable performance quarter after quarter. So my my entire take is that fresh investments with valuations in perspective, I think looks a little bit tight at this point of time. But investors holding on to the stock should hold on to a franchise like Bajaj Finance.
Okay, and we have the NII figure as well, which has risen 45% year on year to 1,418 crores this quarter versus 979 crores on a year on year basis. Really nothing to complain about in terms of the numbers. Remember, the gross NPLs have risen to that 1.47% mark, and that is because of the transitioning to 120-day NPA recognition as opposed to 150 days in the previous quarter, and that's the reason why you're seeing that bump up which has come into the gross NPLs as well. But nonetheless, still a 1.5% odd gross NPL figure. So overall, NII profit figure extremely strong this time for Bajaj Finance. And I've noticed, Anuj, that it reacts slowly and steadily to its numbers. It's not one of those stocks that goes up. It very rarely goes up 5 to 6% on the day of its numbers. It's always a steady outperformer over a period of time.
I tell you something, we won't be able to show you a 10-year chart. If you go to Google Finance or Yahoo Finance and do say a 8-year or 9-year chart, I have not seen a more linear chart than Bajaj Finance. It's been that kind of a stock. And as Ekta pointed out, it's reacting now 2% higher. Let's pull out Bajaj Finserv as well, a group company, and almost in similar space, of course. That's the one where a lot of action is already taking place. So let's pull out Bajaj Finserv, and of course this cross-holding as well in Bajaj Finserv. So that stock is also
consolidates Bajaj Finance's numbers, and then it has its insurance business, which is general and life insurance. So Bajaj Finserv is basically consolidating Bajaj Finance's numbers. If you want to buy the general insurance and other insurance business, then you go for Bajaj Finserv. If you want to just go for the lending business, it's finance.
Oh yes, phenomenal stock, of course, up about 2.5%. But let's move on and discuss some more stocks. Pull out intraday chart of Jindal Steel and Power now. I mean, really, while we were talking about Bajaj Finance, that's the one which is now surging 12.5% higher now at this point on Jindal Steel and Power. Mayuresh, any thoughts on this stock?
No, unfortunately, Anuj, I don't cover this one.
Fair enough. So in the mid-cap basket, before we let you go, any fresh picks that you have at current levels?
Again, Anuj, I think if you take a 2-year perspective from the current levels, I think Navkar Corporation is something that can be looked at by long-term investors. The ICD that they're getting at in Vapi, 27% of the volumes, basically supportive of the JNPT business with the rail transmission lines and the rail connectivity that Navkar has got. That gives it superior advantage compared to its peers. Secondly, if you look at the cost structure, I think the EBITDA margin is expected to remain in that 41-42% kind of range. And largely, if you look at the top line growth, we're still expecting a 30-33% growth to come through, a bottom line growth of 31-32%, which will basically mean that the EPS for FY18 should touch somewhere around 11.5 odd rupees. And if the operating leverage benefits, as I was mentioning, through Vapi come through, along with the expectations of higher commodity movement happening, specifically in terms of fibers, marbles, etc., I think that can have further leverage benefits in terms of volume growth, which is actually grown around 15% on a YOY comparison for FY16 over FY15. So largely, I think at 17.5 times, we believe it's fairly valued. So I think Navkar looks like a very promising bet, but again on declines and in a very staggered manner over the next few months.
Okay, fair enough. Mayuresh, we're going to let you go on that note. Thanks very much for joining in and taking us through all of your views on the markets and stocks. So yes, Bajaj Finance up around 2.5% reacting to what has been a stable quarter.